Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Margaret.
Hello, hello. How are you?
I'm good.
The last event that I attended, it took me 23 minutes to get on, so I got on early just in case. But my technical things seem to be working this evening.
Well, I thought you had a great idea of sending a reminder, this is about to start, because I know sometimes I sign up for things and then I need an immediate reminder.
Yeah,
So-
no, when I did the sonnet one, it's like so many people signed up for it and then they didn't show up. And I'm like, what, where did I go wrong? So I'm like, I'll send reminders this time.
So apparently if we click the link that you provided, Tori, we get on all as you.
Oh, well.
So I've just renamed myself.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
Interesting.
I can probably do that too, I suppose.
Well, it says WFOP host, but Margaret is not you.
Well, that's why there's so many Tory Grant well houses in the thing. There's a lot of them. A lot of me.
Maybe that's a political statement.
Well, we learned something, didn't we? That's a lot of Tory Grant well houses.
Continue. Don't push leave. Continue.
I was trying to read the other thing
No.
too.
You want to get on the
Oh, no, I'm Tori Grant.
Hang on, I'm gonna rename you so I know which one to share with. There you go.
well, this is registry. You can do this.
I already registered.
No. So now
That's
you
how I
gotta
got the link.
see where's the Zoom. Where's the picture?
That's an interesting icebreaker, huh? We're gonna have to have to ask people who they really are.
Or just tell them to rename themselves.
Well, somebody told me how to do that once, so I did it once, but I don't remember how to do it.
You go to the blue little square at the top right of your own little block and the 3 dots, and you pull that down, and the perhaps the last one says rename.
No,
Sorry, I should let you do that,
You're
Tori.
on already.
Thank you.
No, it's fine.
But I'm trying to find.
I
where
like
you are.
groupthink.
Oh,
Groupthink works.
I'd like to be able to see them. I
Oh,
don't
Doris,
know.
we need to figure out. There. Okay, let's see. So there you are.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, good.
Okay, there's your picture. You like that? Or?
Not particularly.
No, you have to like your face. Let's
Well,
see.
I don't like
Yeah, that's good.
it. Okay.
Or let's see.
Down a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, they gotta be able to see
Okay.
now.
I turned it down a little bit.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Lori.
Change your view to gallery, full screen.
Are we going to have to change our name?
Well, who are you? I'll do it.
I'm Marilyn McKnight. I know how to change it, but I mean, there's five Tories.
Yes.
I have no idea.
There, it's down here.
If you actually
There's
click
Nick
the
again.
image,
Yeah.
you get, if you right click your image, you get an
Yeah,
option, option to rename yourself.
Do you want to leave your name there?
I'll leave my
the
own
way it
name
is?
if it's up there. I don't,
It is
I can't
Tony.
see
what?
it.
Tony Grant Warehouse.
That's me.
Hey, so
Oh,
Doris has your name.
I can take your name. I'm Doris. I'm Doris Hayes.
Tori, you have multiple personalities.
Yes, yes. It's an interesting icebreaker I chose.
Here, but I don't see me. Do you all hear me?
I see
Your
you.
name.
You do? I don't see
I do.
me.
Okay, what do you want, Doris?
Doris is fine.
Huh. Oh, I'm Tori. Huh.
Yes, if you want to just change your name, you can right click or pick the three.
There I am. You
Yeah.
got
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
Thank you.
but it's on speaker view.
Well, but so that we can see her because she's the one
Okay,
doing
wait a
it.
minute.
We're gonna want to see Margaret talk once she gets going.
Oh, this is funny. Marilyn McKnight.
No longer Tori. That's
If you want to, if you want
I see
to
that. I see that. I'm disappearing.
make it so
it's
you
kind of
don't see
interesting just to kind of
anybody, you
take
do
you
that.
on, Tori. I don't know. What do you think?
Then you can move it to show.
This might
I
have some
thought
interesting
I was
discussions
being
on.
so clever, but
Okay.
not so much.
Okay, so you can
How do we change our
one.
names?
Okay.
It might be nice to see everybody,
Yeah, it's kind of nice.
but then you can put it up here. So you just see the speaker.
If I touch that,
Here, no.
Jan Bosman, I haven't seen you since Madison from about 1,000 years ago. How are you?
Are you in Arizona or someplace?
no. Okay.
No, not really. That was
Oh,
a couple weeks ago,
Here
but
to
for a
the
very short time.
dots.
I'm still in
Several
Wisconsin.
dots.
okay. Good to see you.
You too.
Mm,
I've been
it's
reading
not
the stuff you
changing.
write. It's fun to read your stuff.
Marianne.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yes.
chat, expand yourself.
Right click on your image. All right. Menu will pop up with the
Well, at
rename.
least they're-
Oh,
Here's the chat. If you
rename.
want to see it, if you want to
Oh,
chat to
good.
anybody.
What do I do if I want to chat? I don't know.
Here, chat.
Margaret,
Chat
you want
down
to get
here.
started or you want to
Say
give people
something
a
to
couple
everybody,
more
right.
minutes?
Mhm.
Somebody just,
Hmm.
Okay, there's everybody.
Oh,
If you
hang
just
on.
want to see the one person, you can
Mhm.
minimize that. So what
I
do you
like
want to
seeing
do
everybody
right now?
right now.
I'm not sure if we can move this.
That's a great
over.
avatar, whoever that is that just came
That's
in.
even better.
how did I become Tory Grant Wellhouse?
You,
And if you go here, you can see more people.
Somebody
because
did
I
that to me.
shared my login link and that's what we've learned. My login link is uniquely for me, I
Let's
guess.
see view.
Do you remember that show, What's Your Name? And then it's, will the real Tory
Yeah.
Grant Wellhouse please step forward?
Oh, I
Yes.
remember
Okay, you
that.
can see everybody now.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
Okay. So you can stay here.
That's good.
Well,
Who
if you guys
is
are
Tory
still-
Grant
And
Wellhouse?
if you
by
want
the
to
way?
change the view, you can go
I
there.
don't even see me.
You guys won't forget my name.
You'll see a little you. Here, you're right there.
Okay,
Mhm.
that's good. Maybe I'll take
Hey,
my
Annette.
glasses off.
maybe.
We discovered my link creates a multiple
Oh.
Tory Grant well houses. So
I see that. I can go, I can sign out and sign in.
no,
on the-
all you got to do is right click and change and rename.
Oh,
Right click and
rename.
rename.
See, and I've got yours, so that's good.
It's actually in the menu. You don't have to right click anything.
Not necessarily. I don't think there's more.
The menu is right up here,
No one is around.
and you can change your name.
They can hear you speaking.
Oh, yes, the three blue dots.
Yeah,
Okay. That's
I
another.
changed mine back to my real name. Somebody did a sex
Okay, I'm
change.
gonna go move my cart. now.
Okay, thank you.
Multiple personalities, sex changes. It's a crazy group.
You want a poem about that? I can read you a poem about that.
Yeah, yeah, I think there's material there, right? Ionette.
Yes.
Lots.
All right, well, I think I'm gonna get us, oh, I got one more Tory Grant Wellhouse to let in.
How do we change our name, Tori?
If you go to the three blue dots in the upper right-hand corner, you'll get an option to rename. Or somebody put instructions in the chat also.
Okay.
Yes, yes, I'll be asking people to mute themselves once Margaret gets going. Okay, my computer says it's 7:03, so I'm gonna kick us off. So I'm Tory Grant Wellhouse. And I am the regional person for the Northeast. I also help with the website. And so I'm happy to present Margaret Rozga tonight, who's leading the first in a series of 2 workshops. Tonight, it will be on the front lines, and then in September, it will be behind the lines. 3 blue dots in the upper right-hand corner. You get a choice to rename yourself.
Or right click, just right click on your square. That did it for me.
Yep, or right click if that's easier. Yes, we learned that each link is uniquely a person. So we started out with quite a few Tory Grant Wellhouses. So I am happy to introduce Margaret, and then I will kindly ask everybody to mute themselves unless called upon. Margaret creates poetry from her ongoing concern for social justice issues. She was a participant in Milwaukee's marches for fair housing and later married civil rights leader Father James Gropey. She will share her process. Please welcome Margaret.
Thank you, Tori. And I also want to thank you for all that you do for the Wisconsin Fellowship of Poets, the website, and I know that you also do the layout for Bramble. It's just wonderful to have you do all these chores. That would be too much for some of us. I also want to thank the Fellowship of Poets for all the support they give to poetry across the state, and including the Wisconsin Poet Laureate program. And of course, I want to thank all of you for being here this evening to do some writing. And I am going to have you do quite a bit of writing this evening. And I want to get to the writing rather quickly. I think that sometimes we use all of our energy talking and then there's not enough left over for the writing. So I'm going to have you do 3 quick warm-ups, just a little bit about the guidelines. If you are going to be writing by hand on, with a pen or pencil or on paper, please leave yourself some space. Write on every other line. Leave a generous right-hand margin, because there'll be a point at which you may want to make insertions. And it's easier if you leave yourself some room than if you're trying to squeeze things in when it's already pretty tight. So leave some spaces. If you're working electronically, it's easier to insert things. So that's not such a concern if that's the case. The writings will be timed. That is uncomfortable for some people who like to mull things over before they get going. But the purpose often is to bypass the critic and get some words on paper. And I'm a firm believer that if you write, the words will come. The timing is partially to push you to just get right with it. If the first couple of things you write are nothing that you'd ever want to stay with, well, then don't stay with them. But the act of writing will generate your thinking, and you'll be able to write things that you like better. If the writing exercise goes for more than a couple of minutes, I will give you a minute warning that the time is about to run out. And what I would suggest you do at that point, if you have more things that you want to say, if you just write yourself a note, if I had more time, I would also talk about the use of garlic to keep bugs away from the apple tree, or whatever it is that you would talk about. Write yourself a note about where you would go if you had more time. Some people, on the other hand, are very quick and to get down what they want to say on a particular prompt. And if that's the case, if you have something that is shareable, you can use that extra time to put it in the chat, and somebody else might pick it up. I think that point will become clearer in just a minute, because the first thing that I want you to do, the first little exercise here, and this is a super quick one, just a minute or two. You won't need more time than that. What I'd like you to do, since we're going to be talking about writing about social justice issues, will you write a brief list of some of the issues that are of particular concern to you? What are the social justice things that weigh on your mind, that you wish you could solve, that you'd like to take some action on if only you could, or that you actually do, like something that you're actually involved in working on? And if you finish your list, 1, 2, 3, and some other people are still writing, you can make some suggestions in the chat. Issues that you're concerned about that others might be as well, but they're maybe not thinking about them right now. Okay, so that's the first quick little warm up. The second one is a little bit lengthier. I would like you to write about where you are. Where are you? And that question can be taken in a number of ways. And it can begin with, where are you physically, geographically? It can also include emotionally, mentally, demographically, poetically, economically. Where are you? And again, remember, don't go all the way out to the margins. Don't bunch you're writing, leave yourself some space because you may want to make some insertions later. And you don't have to do this as a poem, just, sentences, phrases. Think you have information you want to convey rather than thinking about how you would structure it if you were doing this as a poem. Where are you? One more minute. And then this is the third thing that I would like you to do. And so again, give yourself some space from whatever you wrote before to start this new item. What I'd like you to do is to write a letter, a postcard, an email to poetry. Dear poetry. So you're personifying poetry. You're thinking about poetry as an entity that can listen to you. If I like the postcard idea, for one thing, it keeps it fairly brief. The space that you have to write on a postcard is also a good way to think about the space for these exercises where you want to leave room to make insertions later. And if you're thinking postcard, then you're thinking, okay, poetry is somewhere else. You and poetry are not in the same space right now. Of course, the cliche postcard is having a wonderful time, wish you were here. So take about 4 minutes to write to poetry. Okay, another minute. Okay, so I'll give you a couple of minutes to rest from moving your hand. And let me say a couple of words about this series of workshops and how I see social justice, political poetry, whatever you want to call it, on the front lines, behind the lines. I think that most of us are in one position or another in terms of the social justice issues that we are concerned with. On the front lines, perhaps the most obvious case of being on the front lines is participating in a direct action of some sort, being on a march, going to a rally, going to a town hall meeting and talking to your elected representatives, that kind of frontline sort of thing. There's another kind of frontline poetry that I don't want to forget, and that is the front line that people are sometimes on, people for anything about them that might be visible, skin color, disability, physical appearance, kind of thing. And Claudia Rankin, it does a really wonderful job of writing on the front lines poetry about being African American and always being on the alert for micro or macro aggressions, sort of thing that you talk about, like it's dangerous to drive while black. So there's that kind of being on the front lines as well. if you look at your list of issues, maybe we could just do this by a quick show of hands. How many of you have an issue on your list for which you are on a front line? Okay. That's kind of what I was expecting. And so I think what may make sense for us to do is to think about where and how you are on front lines. The distinction is becoming less clear because, well, actually a friend of mine told me about, she was with her husband and they were in a restaurant and they were waiting to be served and they had their masks on, and the server came and pulled the mask off of her husband and said, "You don't need this here." So all of a sudden he was on the front line where he didn't expect to be. And since she told me that story, I've seen about 3 or 4 other examples of the same thing. There was one in the news tonight about a parent ripping a mask off of a teacher. So I think if you think especially about COVID and climate change and some issues, that you may realize that you are sometimes on the front line. But I think maybe what will work best for us is if we have a week or a month to think about that. And so we'll talk more about the behind the lines kind of poems today. Behind the lines means being supportive, concerned, troubled about an issue, thinking there's something here that needs to be solved, thinking that in a way that causes you some consternation maybe, but you're at a remove from it. Maybe you don't know what to do about it, or maybe you can't do anything about it, or what you can do is pretty limited. So that's the behind the lines kind of thing. And I think those are not the only stances that one can have in relationship to social justice issues. On one extreme, there's not being aware of an issue at all. So it's not a question of you being behind the lines or on the lines. You're just not in the battlefield at all. You're not there at all. And even with the behind the lines or on the front lines, there are different ways to approach that. And let me share some poems with you, at least briefly here. I want to scroll up here. Okay, there are what I call poems that are at where the speaker in the poem, the way that you get the poetic presentation of the issue is let's see, what was I calling it? Is detached. So here, for example, is a poem from my recent book, and it was originally in 200 Nights and One Day, about the open housing marches in Milwaukee. Arms locked to step into street, arms overhead, protection against billy clubs, hands to face, cupped around mouth, doubled over, retching, tear gas, elbows up, angled out, pulled into a rest, arms behind back, wrists caught in handcuffs. Now there's enough detail here that to suggest that this is on the front lines. But it comes in a detached sort of way. Who's saying this? And are they actually in the demonstration, or are they watching it on TV? Where is this information coming from? So it comes to it in a detached sort of way. Here's a poem, another poem about the open housing marches, in which I'm speaking in what's pretty close to my own voice, talking about crossing the 16th Street Viaduct in Milwaukee from the north side to the south side, and the confrontation that takes place as we cross the viaduct. This is what I call an embedded poem. The speaker identifies his or her position in relationship to the action. We walked past Pepe's. I touched the glass. It was cool and smooth. So you know where the information is coming from. It's coming from this self-identified I, in this case, Peggy, me. Okay, and that same, this is a kind of a long poem, and I'm not going to read the whole of it. That same detached versus embedded can occur with behind the lines poems as well, but especially the embedded kind that I want to develop in this workshop. And my desire to do so was reinforced by an interview that I read recently in the current issue of Orion magazine. Camille Dungy, who is the poetry editor at Orion, was interviewing Kaveh Akbar, who has a new book called Pilgrim Bell. And they're talking partially about the title. Where does the title come from? Why does he call it Pilgrim Bell? And among the things that he says is, I'm not interested in writing a book that says, look at all these bad people around me, and aren't you glad I'm here to tell you about them? I think a more honest book is like, isn't it wild that we're all so compromised? So I don't know that I think that's the only reason that you might do an embedded kind of approach, but it's the detached political poem that gets sometimes into being a rant, or that even if that wasn't intended on the part of the writer, and the writer is pretty careful to keep it under control, people might read it that way. But if it's embedded, if the position of the speaker in relationship to the action is there, that does something to the tone that I think Akbar is getting at. And Camille Dungy responds saying, the path of coming to this moment of reckoning and awakening is as important as showing up there. So how do you get to the point where you're concerned about something? You can embed that into the poem in one way or another. You can weave your concern about a social justice issue into your other concerns, into what you do as you go about your daily life. So one of the things that I want to do tonight is to pay attention and to practice writing the kinds of poems where you know where the writer's voice is coming from. Let's look at one example that does this. And some of you may already suspect what I'm going to have you do with those quick warm-ups you did. But oh, how can I get this to scroll down? There we are. Okay. This is a poem that was written the first time I did this workshop, which was a year ago. I was doing it as a series of 4 workshops for a Woodland Pattern bookstore in Milwaukee. And the interesting thing that happened with that series was we did 2 of them in person, and then the pandemic hit. So there was about a month while I learned how to do Zoom so we could continue. And what happened that I thought was interesting as I looked at the poems was they went from poems about being behind the lines to being poems on the front lines. There was something about that COVID experience that put people into situations where they found themselves on a front line. Maybe because of their job, maybe they were essential workers, maybe because of just going about their business and encountering people who had different opinions and were quite vociferous about them. But anyway, this is a poem from that first workshop called Swimming. Wet my hair, slip the cap onto the top of my head as I tuck the remaining hair into the silky silicone. I ponder the news article I just read. Defog my goggles, making circles with my spit, dunk them in the water and rinse them out. How 30% of Americans said they would vote for a health bill they never read. Stretch my calves, arms, shoulders. When did we stop being curious, thirsty for knowledge, and blindly decide based on Democrat or Republican, Black or white, man or woman? Choose what lane I swim in and walk to the edge of the deck. Why must we be forced to choose a side to fit in? Dive in, put my right palm on top of my left hand, squeezing my ears together with my arms, long, streamlined. When did he said, she said, they said, become I said, we said? Rotate to my left side, take a stroke with my right, and kick fast and hard. I think about the separation of humans from the earth, from each other, from their families, from themselves. I connect to the water. Feels good to be part of something, anything. Is that why? I take the scraps of what we can get to belong, lose our empathy and kindness to who is outside of our immediate circle or what is unknown in our immediate understanding. I start to feel hot as I swim faster and faster, swimming into the vastness I feel, the separation that I long to understand, and the ache to belong to myself. So as the speaker is swimming and as she is recording the things that she does as a swimmer, she's remembering this article that she read. And the act of swimming allows her some freedom of thought, so her thoughts can wander and she can pursue her thinking about what happens when we're too exclusive. Okay, so that's one way that one's experience of doing whatever you do, being wherever you are, can blend with, can get embedded with your social justice concerns. You can read an article that brings that focus to your attention. Can you think of some other ways that, what might be some other sort of messengers or messages that will interrupt, if you will, what you're doing? Anybody have some suggestions?
Over
I'm
here,
just,
conversation.
Conversation, yeah, you're talking to somebody and the person says something that gets you thinking, and the person could have said it directly about your issue, or the person could have said something that gets you thinking about your issue, even if it wasn't quite on your issue. Okay, so another person could interrupt your thought, could layer your thought.
I'm thinking of taking a walk after you read the newspaper. And you're walking and it's calm and serene and you're in a neighborhood, but little bits of what you have read are interrupting the serenity of the walk.
Okay, so again, a newspaper article is operative here, just as it was with the swimming. But here the resonance is with there's a closer correspondence, a more immediate correspondence between the article and what you're seeing as you're walking. Okay, the swimmer had to work a little bit to make a connection with swimming. Marilyn?
I'm thinking of a sort of a flashback of what is happening now in schools and with kids and starting their, you know, their first day back in school after having had all of these, you know, months and years of problems related to COVID. And then for me, it's flashing back to when I was teaching and when I was involved with protests up in Madison. And, you know, that was a governor trying to mandate what should be happening to teachers. It was, you know, but obviously indirectly then to students. But for me, that when you talked about that, it's like all of the horrible stuff that's going on right now with the COVID and the masks and the non-masks and the mandates and the, you know, it made me think of my time when I was kind of fighting for something. So.
Okay, something currently going on. So you're seeing it on the news?
Sure.
You're reading about it in an article, you're having a conversation that brings it up. Also, our thinking isn't really linear. You know, we try to make it linear when we write essays, but when you're not trying to make an argument, when you're just sort of at your leisure thinking, you do flash back and flash forward, and this is like that, and this reminds me of that. And actually, there's a poem in the group here that does exactly that sort of thing. Here's, and actually she's with us tonight. Marjorie wrote this poem. There's an artesian well in my hometown where people come from miles around with their plastic jugs, fill them up to the top. Still the water keeps coming in ever-ending stream. Now, the speaker doesn't say she's there at that artesian well right now. She's remembering it, it looks like, but she could be there actually physically. And the flowing of the water reminds her of her religious belief, flowing of grace. And then there's this leap in thought to people who lack water, oppressed people, people in war-torn lands. I suppose we could bring it up to date and talk about people trying to get out of Afghanistan and being crowded at the airport, not knowing what's going to happen. And there they are without water. So the social justice issue gets embedded in thinking about something else or beginning to think about something else. And it takes on a real social justice aspect as you move to the end of the poem. What if God is asking himself the same question, looking to us for answers? So I think that's especially where the social justice aspect comes in, rather than relying on somebody else to do it. What am I going to do about it? Brings in that question. One more thing I'd like you to notice here, because at some point we want to talk about turning our drafts into completed poems, finished poems. And one of the ways to do that is to have a key term that gets woven into each stanza. And I think you have that here with these last three stanzas: grace, 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 in each of those stanzas. But let's look back at your own writing. Okay, you wrote a piece about where you are. Here I am. Here I am in your house, in your city, in your socioeconomic class, in your troubled soul or happy celebration. Okay, so will you go back to that list, that writing that you did, the draft that you did about where you are? Maybe some of you already have a social justice issue in that quick warm up. But if you don't, or if you do, if you don't, what could insert it? What could come to you where you are, or where you were at the moment that you wrote that, that would make you be concerned about one of your social justice issues? Do you need me to say that again? Am I saying it clearly? And this is where you will insert something in the spaces that you left. So you may have said, I'm sitting at the island in my kitchen, wondering why I seem to be Tory Grant Wellhouse.
Margaret, I have a question.
Yes.
What if you get to the point where you feel your issue is, let's say, insignificant compared to the issue that I was saying was my social concern? You know, I could say more, but that's it. I mean, in other words, this is so personal to me, and I'm just one person, and it's really not a big deal to the rest of the world. But for me, it does speak to this larger, truly significant issue that is out there in the real world. I guess I'm kind of wondering how my little issue can be brought together with the bigger issue.
Yeah, well, again, I'm a great believer in if you write, the words will come.
Uh-huh.
So you might write some false starts before you get to it. Now, let me see if I understand what your little small issue is. Do you see your little small issue as being your participation in the demonstrations in Madison when you were a student?
No, it doesn't involve that. It involves something that has happened to me within the last year.
Oh, okay.
And it kind of speaks to me. I can identify with some of the people going through what I went through on a larger issue, you know, and without going into all the details, but.
You wrote about where you are in the warm-up for today.
Right.
Okay, so one of the places where you are is thinking that you have a little concern. Now, you may not have written that when you did the warm-up. You may have written that you're in your living room and you're turning on a light. And while I'm turning on a light, I'd sure like to shed some light on this little issue that I have. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Fit it in however you can.
Okay.
It's part of where you are, this concern about this little issue. And
Yeah,
part
and
of where you are is wondering what bridge will take you from your instance of this to the larger experience.
Okay.
Okay.
I think I don't know enough about the larger experience. That's what it is. I mean, it exists. I'll work on it. I'll work on it.
Okay, but you raise an interesting point. Your writing is going to, not just you personally, but anybody's writing, is going to have a harder time of having the emotional impact of being able to bring others into the experience if you try to talk about something that you don't really know. Okay. So you have to be faithful to what your state of knowledge is. Of course, you can go look stuff up. You can't do it tonight as we're doing this workshop, but you could do it as you were working on the poem. You could do research. But if your current state of knowledge is a question, then where are you right now? Right now, I'm facing a question. Right now, this question mark is like a sickle that is threatening me. I don't know. I just tried to play around a little bit with the symbol of a question mark, which kind of looks like a,
Yeah.
but yeah, whatever.
Would you be willing to, even though you've been continuing to talk about what you said was the assignment, could you articulate it one more time, please?
Yes, thank you, Lucy. I would be happy to do that. What I want you to do is to look at your list of issues, pick one that I'm going to use a word I hate to use, trigger. Some trigger could insert that issue into where you are or where you were as you wrote where you are. Okay, you have this warm up that you did about where you are. Okay, and you have spaces in that writing. What you want to do is insert in one of those spaces one of your issues, but you have to embed it. So what in where you are, what interrupts, what inserts itself into, do you get a phone call and somebody asks you that? Does your friend suddenly appear? Do you glance down at a newspaper and are reminded? Do you have a flashback? What happens that your issue inserts itself in where you are? Barry? Unmute.
Oh, not me.
Barry, you have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Now I can, but I
Okay.
didn't hear anything you said before. Can you hear me?
Well, it probably wasn't worth it. So one of my issues is suicide and mental health issues. And so in my little narrative, I write about the headaches that I've had and the fact that none of the doctors that I'm seeing seem to take these headaches seriously, but they really affect my level of functioning. And I realized that people who commit suicide, and I just had a friend who committed suicide, really don't have any hope that things are going to get better. And that's one of the things that I'd like to key in with a poem about this issue.
I'm sorry about the loss of your friend. I'm sorry for your grief. So when you wrote about where you are, did you begin by talking about where you are physically? Where you're in your house, you're sitting at a desk? Okay.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right.
And then you already began to talk about the headaches and how they make you aware of hopelessness. Did you already write that as part of where you are?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
That it made my life very hard. Nobody was listening to me. I felt like things were not going to get better. Is this going to be my life for the rest of my life? And then I connected it to my friend who committed suicide and the fact that she really had no hope that things were going to get better.
Well, it sounds to me like you're 10 steps ahead of me. Sounds to
Oh.
me like you've already done it. You're already done.
Well, I haven't written the poem yet.
Well, but before you write a poem, you need a draft. And what you have now is a draft.
Right. Good.
So there's a question of shaping it into a poem. And we're not dealing with that question yet. That's why I said, okay, you're a couple steps ahead of me.
Okay.
Okay, so I hope that makes you feel good.
It does now. Thank you.
If I could ask another question, please. It seems that maybe when you asked us where we were, you wanted us to be in one place and describe it elaborately or more fully than sort of a brainstormed list of places. So say if I made a list of different places, one for emotion, one for physical, one for geography, then perhaps to do this, I need to redo the where I am to describe one place more fully. So then I could insert the issue into that place.
Well, we're going to do another exercise that will be kind of like that, but I write a lot of list poems. And so you may work with what you have may work as a draft that will become a poem.
Yeah.
So you have where you are physically, where you are mentally, where you are emotionally, a list. Add to the list where I am politically, where I am empathetically.
Right. And maybe the disjointed nature of the list will lend itself to writing that brings out something.
Well, yeah, there are lots of ways to make that list less disjointed. One of them is the thing that I pointed out in the sample poem with the repetition of a key term.
Okay.
Parallel structure of the items in the list pulls them together as you're moving toward a poem.
Okay, good suggestions. Thanks.
One more minute. Okay, so we actually had some discussion during the writing time, and that may have answered some questions and cleared up some possibilities for you. Would anybody like to share something of what they have written, or share how they inserted their social justice concern into where they are?
I will. I'm in my study, and on the opposite wall, there's a huge tree that I've painted, and it's a family tree. So there are pictures all over it. And I inserted into a poem about my family tree. I've been thinking a lot about critical race theory because I'm a former history teacher, and the people who are in an uproar over critical race theory who can't tell you what critical race theory is. And so really thinking about my very white family on that family tree, and how we all come from common African ancestors. But yeah. So yeah, those are the two things I blended together.
So the tree, the picture that you have on your wall was the way that you got that concern into where you are now. Okay, good. Okay. Somebody asked when this session ends, and it can go as long as 8:30. At 8:30, we will sign off for sure. If you have to leave, if you were thinking it was just 1 hour or 75 minutes and you have to leave at some point, that's fine. That, then just say your goodbye in the chat, and we'll look forward to seeing you again sometime. But if you can stay until 8:30, I am willing to stay until 8:30.
Margaret?
Yes.
I would say something about I wrote a line when we were doing that original writing about I'm late to the dance. And so it made me think about when I was a child and we would go old time dancing. And so I'm talking about late to the dance on black white issues. And now I'm in a group called Continuing the Conversation, but I'm pretty old, and it took me a long time to get to understand, well, as limited as I can even speak to that now. So I think if I can figure out a way to write a poem about the old time dancing and putting on new shoes now and getting there late, but still getting in a schottisch or a polka with a person of color, maybe I can do that.
It sounds like a great idea to me. I think the whole dance idea gives you a real workable metaphor that you can work into a motif in the poem, lots of dance terms. And dancing is a social thing. It is with other people. It is sometimes with one partner, but usually a dance involves many people. So yeah, no, I think that it sounds really promising to me.
Thanks.
Were you just wanting us to share ideas about the poem that we generated, or parts of the poem, or?
Well, at this point, I am willing, I'm asking if anybody has something that they'd really like to share, and you can share as much or as little as you want, or nothing at all. There's no obligation to share.
Okay, I mean, I have a portion of a poem. Did you want me to share that? I'm sorry, you cut out.
I would love it if you're willing to do that.
Okay, what's the best way to do that? Just put it in the chat?
Or just read it.
Oh, okay. It might be, well, I guess the italics won't translate to the chat anyway. So I was gonna say it's visual, but I'm in my second story office on the east side in Madison, in Wisconsin, south of the Driftless region. Across the ocean in the desert, people drop to their death from the wings of planes trying to escape the war zone. I'm inside my pounding head, worn out and fuzzy from a long day of college classes. Girls in hijabs trek the long dry miles to school to be barred at the door from entering. I'm inside a new marriage, trying to find the guardrails of who I am and who my partner is and who we are together. The young girl is negotiated for by her father, who signs the marriage contract. The groom is asked 3 times if he accepts her. I'm at the edge of 50, slowing my steps while the rest of the world twirls by at the edge of my vision. The elderly women hide away in the house, sweltering in burqas, illiterate, ignored, alone. That's as far as I got.
Wow.
I think embedding the social justice concern into where you are makes for a very powerful poem. And that I think, you know, you demonstrate that very well.
Thank you.
So it sounded to me like what I want to do is talk a little bit about moving from draft to finished poem. And it sounded to me like you have sections that are about equal of where you are and then where the people halfway around the world are. Are you dividing those by, is it one stanza of you, one stanza of them, or is it all one stanza? Is it, is the italics either you or the others?
It's currently all one stanza, but the sections about Afghanistan are in italics.
You see how your choice to do it as all one stanza becomes part of the meaning of what you have done, or the meaning of your poem? Whereas if you had separate stanzas, that would say something else.
Yeah, I think keeping it all one stanza keeps it, I wanted to make it clear that it was in my awareness, and that we weren't separate.
And that's that's exactly what I got.
Great.
Yeah. All the choices that you make about style will have some impact on the total effect of the poem. Yeah, so stanza length is something that you have to think about, and how many stanzas, and how long should they be, and how long should your lines be. Those are all considerations that you want to have. In the sample poems that we looked at, the 5 Gestures for Freedom was all one stanza. The What If poem was separate stanzas of unequal length. And the divisions seemed to be because there was a leap that was made from the artesian well to the people abroad, and there was greater separation there, and the stanza break showed that greater separation. Let me look at one more poem with you, talking about it both in terms of this embedding technique and in terms of poetic style. Boogie woogie. You shout from the other room. You ask me how to spell boogie woogie, and instantly I think, what luck. No one has been declared, no, oh, that's a typo. No war has been declared. No fire has consumed our city's monuments, our bodies, our dwellings. The river didn't flood. No friends have been arrested. It's only boogie woogie. I sigh, relieved, and say, it's spelled just like it sounds, boogie woogie. Here's the insertion of the social justice concerns. Is triggered
Speedy.
by the speaker's own thoughts. When somebody calls to him, he immediately thinks bad news. But it turns out not to be bad news. And the bad news comes as kind of a relief. What luck. No war has been declared, and so on. Couple of other things about this poem. In the course of 14 lines, boogie woogie is used 4 times. It's used in both stanzas. It's used as the title. It's used twice in the last stanza. Just the repetition is one of the things that pulls this together. There was a question before about, well, I have this list of things. I think, Lucy, that was your question. I have this list of things and it's kind of disjointed. Well, his list is kind of disjointed. War, fire, flood, those are different things. But the similarity of the way he says them, the way he lines them up, pulls it together as I have a range of concerns. I'm always afraid that one of these bad things is going to be happening. Oh, but it doesn't, at least now. So we have this moment where it's just spelling, that's all. You'll notice one other thing here is there's no punctuation. And that's another choice that you can make as you're moving from your draft to your more finished poem. You make choices about line length, you make choices about stanza division, you made choices about how much and what kind of social justice concern will enter into this where you are. He's in one room and his person who's asking him questions is in another room. But it's another way that you can indicate less separation. Here he does have two different stanzas. He doesn't quite make the stanza divisions where you might expect them. The river not flooding could go up above with the other disasters. All the disasters could be their own stanza. So you get a little bit of the layering by the fact that those stanza divisions are not really quite aligned with content divisions. So there's all kinds of ways that you can embed social justice concerns into other things that you are doing. We can try one more example here. Will you do a quick warm-up that is giving steps in how you do something you're good at doing? Preferably something little, like you're good at cleaning the cat litter box, or you're good at making lasagna, or you're good at transplanting lilies. Another minute. Okay, I bet you already know what I'm going to ask you to do next. No?
Embed our social justice issue in our list.
Oh, how did you know? Yeah, okay, so as you're putting the noodles in the boiling water, are you also watching TV and you see some news event that gets you thinking about that? Or does the boiling water make you think of some social justice issue, or do the noodles? Or does the layering of the lasagna? How, as you're doing this thing that you are good at doing, you're good at doing it so you don't need to think about it that deeply. You have room in your brain to think about something else. And something happens that makes you think about this issue that really is important to you, that you're really concerned about. So in the space, you don't have to fill up all the spaces if you skipped every other line, you don't have to fill in every other line. But at some point, what happens to make you ponder one of your deeper concerns? Okay, one more minute. Okay, would anyone like to talk about how that exercise went for you? Matt, is that you?
Yeah, yes. Actually, it worked pretty well because I have an issue that was top of mind and it's bugging me and it worked. It worked for an issue for a thing I was doing yesterday and then again today. So
Great.
I was thinking about roasting tomatoes to make sauce. Okay, fresh tomatoes, juicy, wonderful, nutritious. And I can hardly read my writing here, but I'm also thinking about a friend who has someone in prison and how that person doesn't get good nutrition. And then that kind of led me into going back and forth with how I put garlic in the tomatoes and how good that tastes and how the food that this person in prison doesn't have anything that tastes good. And then I know how to use the stove. That person probably has forgotten how to use the stove. Maybe things have changed so much that a digital stove doesn't make sense to that person. And I'm talking about, you know, my freedom, the buttons. I start talking about the tomatoes and it goes on to how the peels of the tomatoes float to the top of the sauce. And then I think about how she can't get an appeal. So I'm kind of relating that. So I think I can work with this.
Yeah, that alternating style often works. Sometimes all you need is a little bit in the middle, but if you can do it at greater length, that's great.
Okay. If it didn't alternate, can you do it as start it out as one thing and then have that turn for the second half?
Yeah, you could try that. You could try it both ways and see which way you like it better.
Okay.
Yeah. Marianne, were you going to say something?
I was thinking about luck. I'm really good at finding four-leaf clovers. And I was thinking about, I spent a lot of time on the Ice Age Trail where I can be trotting along and see a four-leaf clover and pick it up. But I was thinking about that when I was doing that. Also, I found just the tufts and bones of probably a rabbit, but it was a synonymous one. I was just thinking about how luck has so much to do, like your skin color that you're just born with or something, but just the luck of the draw and how that can just change everything. So I was just kind of putting four-leaf clovers together with this dead rabbit, or possibly dead rabbit, because now it's kind of anonymous and it's a stranger that I really don't know about that can't love this morning like I was loving. So I'm kind of playing with those thoughts and words. And I kind of put it together, and I think it has some kind of possibility of going farther about saying how so much that really does. I think about that a lot, of just the chance of things. And yeah, and my ability to understand.
One of the things that we will have time to do in September is to look at some of your poems and have more discussion about them. Tori has said that if you want to have one of your poems discussed, if you email it to her, she'll compile a list so that we can share as we're talking about them. Could send you a reminder that, you know, to get your poems that you've worked on between the two meetings so that you can get more feedback next time.
Could she put her email address in the chat?
Sorry, could you put your email address in the chat?
Well, you all know my name now. So it's ToriGrantWellhouse@gmail.com. So I'm thinking that's going to be pretty easy for everybody. But yes, I will put it in the chat too.
And you've also gotten emails from Tori. So you can, unless you're really efficient at deleting emails you don't need anymore.
Is
We have one
deadline?
that you just reply to. The other thing is we want to talk a little bit next time, a little bit more about on the front lines kind of poems. So please do think about when, how, and where you are on the front line, even if you don't think you are. Even if you don't think you are a frontline person. A colleague of mine just told me the other day that she was going to her township meeting because there's a lake in the area and it's been a no wake zone lake, but some people want to have outboard motors and speeding. So she's going to be on the front line when she goes to that meeting. There are all the COVID kinds of things that come up. So, and I think once you begin to think about how that front line is movable, you will come up with some things. One last thing, and it's 8:30, so I'm just going to give you this direction, but you have those postcards that you wrote to poetry. You need to do a follow-up postcard to poetry. Dear Poetry, or make an insertion in the other postcard, but there's not much room in postcards for insertion. So you might have to write another one. And what do you want to tell poetry now? Or maybe poetry has come home. So you can just go next door and talk to her. What's your follow-up conversation with poetry, having gone 1 minute past our end time tonight?
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you very much, Peggy. Bye, everybody.
Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. That was great.
Thanks, Tori.
Hillary.
Until next month.
Excellent. What's the deadline? What's the deadline? Somebody had asked. When do you want the poems?
Oh, like the Monday before the Thursday is fine.
Okay, maybe a follow-up email about that might be good.
Okay, we'll do.
This was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.